going?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Plus, we can edit it.
Yeah, it's not live. We go home and run
Okay.
a program.
All right.
Make sure
Okay.
it's okay.
So the buzzkill is here.
Okay.
Sheila
Nice
Harrington.
to see you.
Nice to see you.
State
Thank you.
representative.
Thank you for having us.
Yep.
Pleasure.
Kathy Lundeen, Sandra Hyde.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We start off with you introducing, then we just really have,
Back
the
and
more you
forth.
talk, we have, a few
Okay.
questions that we throw out there.
Okay.
And it's pretty informal.
Okay. Did you have a specific topic you wanted to start with, or?
So, the issues that are affecting the towns.
Okay.
One is the soil reclamation
Yep.
in Pepperell, the Promise Act, the big ones.
Yep.
School
Maybe
budget.
the size of government, kind of an overview.
Okay.
Proposition 2.5 is a
Okay.
issue that they're
You
voting
just
on
had
in
an
Pepperell
override,
today.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we start off with an introduction.
Okay.
Sheila
Well,
Harrington.
thank you. Well, a lot of good, interesting topics going on in Pepperell. I don't know if they're good. I guess they're interesting. So you were talking a little bit about the soil reclamation, and I'll give you sort of a history of my work in that area. So about a year or so ago, trying to remember the exact date now, it was in the beginning of the summer, which it doesn't feel like right now, but it was around this time, I first became aware of the issue of the soil reclamation problem. And at that point in time, it had been brought to my attention that there was a possibility that the soil was going to be coming from the Green Line Extension project. So there were really big concerns about the toxicity of the soil and the problems with the soil. So the first person with whom I started to communicate was a gentleman at the Department of Transportation. And he researched it and was able to give me proof positive of where every bit of soil from that project was actually going. So around July, I made at least one selectman. I can't remember at the time it was how many I spoke to back at that point. But I think I forwarded them a copy of it and let them know that under no circumstances were they getting any soil from the Green Line Extension project.
That was a selectman in Pepperell.
Yes. So shortly after that, I ended up speaking with the gentleman who owns the land,
Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Burns, and was trying to understand. I guess it's public information.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And I was trying to sort of understand what was going on, and I reached out to the company at that point. I can't really recall if I had much of a conversation with them at that point, but because of the concerns I continued to get from constituents mostly coming to meet with me and such, the next step that I took was with the Department of Environmental Protection. I don't know if you want me to shut that door
Yeah,
so
maybe.
it's not as noisy.
She is.
Sorry. No, that's okay. Plus I can check it.
Yeah, it's just going.
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good.
So at that point, the Department of Environmental Protection was actually becoming very involved in it as far as they could. So what we sort of went back and forth on is as far as they could. As it turned out, it was not an issue that was under the state's jurisdiction. The land was not owned by the state. It did not abut land owned by the state. It was not land that was protected under conservation restrictions, so that it would be a bigger issue, which was sort of like the saving grace in the issue with the pipeline. Part of it had to go through land that would require a 2/3 majority vote of the legislature to take it out of that protection. So
Burton was private land.
private land abutting not state land, but actually I had thought that road was a state road. It was not a state road. It was not within any buffer zone, conservation restrictions, wetlands protection. They had literally no jurisdiction over it. So the next effort on the part of the state was to try to get the people who were putting the project in, that were purchasing the soil reclamation area, or quarry area, I guess some people call it, was trying to get them to agree to an administrative agreement which would allow the state to go on, even though they weren't required to let the state do it, would they agree to do it? And we did get the entity who's putting the project on to agree to let the state do soil testing, and sort of it outlined a bunch of different sort of agreements between the parties as to how they would proceed.
The entity being MCGI, Mass Composting Group, or the lawyer group?
The lawyer group.
The lawyer group.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I was dealing with at that point, they were dealing, the Department of Environmental Protection was dealing with them, and I was dealing with the Department of Environmental Protection. They did promote it. The only way the other side, they said they would agree to do it so long as the town agreed to do it as well. And I was notified about 2 months ago in a letter that the town is not going to go that route.
Not agreeing to it.
No. So therefore, any ability, I have to think of it from the perspective of the state. The state has no other ability to get involved. Our ability was only through a voluntary agreement, but both sides had to agree to it.
But the DEP is still involved?
No,
So
they're
he
no
could
longer
just go
involved.
ahead with it?
But
He can go ahead with it?
I would believe so. I haven't followed whether there was a challenge that I believe the town of Pepperell.
Yeah, the zoning board of
Right,
appeals.
but I don't know. I guess thinking as a lawyer, that would probably be something that, even if the building building inspector
Denied the appeal.
denied, it does not matter really. I think they would litigate it, to be honest
And
with
is
you.
that what they're doing now, litigating in land court?
That's how it has to be done.
That's
yes.
where they're at,
Yeah.
I think.
But I think they're still doing it based upon a zoning. I don't know whether they've actually commenced the legal action. I only was informed they were going to go the other route, but I haven't gotten copied on any
The
documentation.
other route meaning the land court.
That they're not going to do the state level testing, which was not going to be all the time. It was going to be periodic and
Periodic
such, but that was the only thing we could do from the state perspective. So they just said they were going to not accept it and go another route. So
The town's
that
not
I
gonna accept-
haven't been privy
And
to
the
whether
other
they
route is,
started
I
the
think,
action.
is the new bylaws.
Right. Well, we had talked about too another thing that maybe the town was going to do, but I don't believe they have put it in yet. If they are going to do it, would be to get the process started, which would ultimately become a home rule petition to change the zoning bylaws, and then prevent it.
Then,
be able
then
to prevent
stop
it from
it.
that perspective. That would have to be at this town meeting and then go to the ballot
right.
and then go to the
Right.
state house
And they were talking about a cease and desist order too, I think, weren't they?
Well, that's the only other way I think you can stop it, when, if Dave Burton, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I kind of understand. Where you say the DEP is out of it, Dave Burton starts his project. There's some zoning law that they've passed, noise, soil, whatever, and then the town can come in and put a cease and desist order on his.
Once he starts.
once
he
they do the
starts.
bylaw change.
Right,
Yeah, but
Right.
they haven't started the bylaw change.
not that I know.
Well, they started the noise and light
Yeah,
committee, which is writing a bylaw for.
yeah, but this
Right,
one,
but
no.
for right now, I
No,
don't think they have
No, I don't
anything.
know. Can
Yeah,
you
I
do
am
that
not aware of
retroactively? Yeah.
any injunction or cease
No.
and desist at this point.
No, so can we just re-clarify when you said the DEP is out of it? So the DEP is out, does that mean no ACO is needed now? They're not,
There is no ACO because we couldn't get an agreement on it.
okay,
So once that was rejected, there's nothing more they can do.
The state can do, now it's
Right.
up to the town to
Right.
stop him.
Right.
So if those bylaws aren't in effect or weren't in effect when he went
Yeah,
to
can
do
they be
this,
retroactive?
can they be grandfathered in? How, it
And
seems
that
like
is something I'm going to leave to the judiciary because
Yeah,
that is
okay.
really
Yeah.
a legal question,
Right,
and
right.
the case could probably be made for both sides.
Right.
I can't really answer that.
That's
That would have
okay.
to be a litigated
Yeah,
question,
that's
I
right.
think.
You're
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Do you foresee this going on for years?
Well, my own experience in land court, and I haven't had a whole lot of them, fortunately, knock on wood, but in my law practice, I have done some land court work, and it seems to me a longer process. However, I think you can get injunctive relief if there's meaning they can put like a stay sometimes on action until they adjudicate it. So it's hard to predict. Usually if you get sort of injunctive relief, it's fairly quick. And that can kind of hold you like a temporary order throughout the process. But again, that's something that I can't really speak to. They're dogged what would happen there.
Is Dave Burton, you might not know this answer either, is he better off with an ACO or without it? Now that there isn't one involved, does he have is it better for him just to stop the project?
I guess it depends on who you're at. Is it better for him? I would say he's more free to move around and do what he wants.
Is he more liable?
No, because there's nothing that would. Right now, there is nothing to, and that agreement would have it would have been binding of all the parties that agreed. And what it just did is it allowed the DEP to come onto a project land that that they have no jurisdiction over, and be given the jurisdiction by the parties to be able to do it. So obviously they were mainly negotiating with Burton and the people on that sort of side of the fence to try to get an agreement that they could work with. But rightfully so, and I can understand they're not going to agree to an agreement with the state unless the town is agreeable as well.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it wouldn't really mean much to them to do an agreement with the state and then be precluded from the town. Right. So all parties had to be in agreement that would suffice.
And what's going to happen in land court? What kind of decision comes out of there?
Well, my guess is there would have to be a complaint filed by the town against them, and there would be an immediate seeking of injunctive relief that they do a stay on any operations. The complaint would have to say that the town would be in a position, and this is where I get into a little gray area, so I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but if I were to guess, the town would say that they believe that their present bylaws are sufficient to prevent this type of activity, and during the pendency of the litigation, because irreparable harm could be done, they would ask that there be injunctive relief. And not being the attorneys for the town, I'm just sort of surmising that's how they would proceed.
Yeah. We seem to get back to bylaws that aren't there, though, that are getting written as we speak. From what I understand, there is a reliance upon sort of a history of not allowing that type of dumping, so to speak, to take place. And
I think it's the first time in town, though, right? That someone's trying to do that?
Well, there was actually, I believe, a prior
Was
case, and I don't believe it was litigated to a finale. I think there was an agreement between the parties.
Okay. Oh.
So I think they're going to rely upon sort of history, and
so does the town have a chance to stop it?
At this point, only through the courts, or if they're able to hold things off long enough, not have them commence and get the bylaw changed so that it firmly prevents it. But I guess I don't want to overspeak, but I guess that what they may be concerned with is going for that bylaw route if they do have any foothold with the existing bylaws, it may kind of mitigate that argument.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
So if you're saying we don't need it, and then you do it, it sort of it could potentially backfire. I'm not sure.
So how did that come into being? Is that a law, the soil reclamation? Is it a law or a regulation or?
It's actually no, because it's legal to do. People do it all over the place.
Okay.
It's just that a town or a city could put a bylaw in their own zoning bylaws that prohibits it in their town.
But what is the Soil Reclamation Act? How did that come about?
I'm not really sure of an actual act.
I
have not voted
a law.
on one. No, not.
It's
I think they call it a
regulation.
soil reclamation project. But I don't profess to know everything about every law either.
No.
So there could be a
But
soil
you don't remember
reclamation
voting
act.
on it, passing
Oh
it?
no.
Okay.
No, we
so
haven't
it's some
voted
kind
on it.
of regulation or
something
more
that's
of a
allowed.
regulation.
I think it's more that that's the type of work that they're doing. is they're going into a quarried out area and they're using it to dump fill. I think one of the major concerns is where is that fill coming from?
Right.
The only thing we know is where it's not coming from,
Right.
and it's not coming from the Green Line.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't think they have. I don't think the parties have agreed upon locations that it's only going to come from,
right.
nor has. I don't think it's been disclosed.
And even if the state doesn't need to be involved, will the DEP still inspect?
No,
No. So
No, they
who will
can't.
inspect?
the town presumably.
The town is responsible.
Yeah, the only way DEP could be the inspectors if they had that agreement.
Which
they don't have.
Yeah, and they don't.
So it's kind of,
Yeah, so that's why I'm
Open
trying to
season,
only
yeah.
speak
Yeah.
as to the state aspect of
Right.
it, because all the other options that you're discussing are really town
Right.
administration
Right.
And
versus
so the town will
state.
be responsible for inspecting the soil. That if it does proceed, and starts
Arguably,
coming
yes.
into town,
Yeah,
the town would have
yes.
to hire an inspector.
Arguably, the state wouldn't have
The
to
state
unless
wouldn't.
it was under the ACO.
can Dave Burton start before the land court is settled?
Yeah,
So
I'm
it's
not
his
even aware,
land?
and I don't want to get into something I
No.
don't know about, but I don't know that the land court has been started, and you seem to know
Yeah,
more
there was
than
a
I in
date
that
for
respect.
it to start. There was a date. There was
Yeah,
a
there
judge
was a
assigned
date
and
with a hearing.
a date
Okay.
decided on. I can't remember
All
what
right.
it was.
Unless
But that's all we knew.
So the judge would have to put a stay on it, an injunctive relief, and that would be my understanding.
To stop the project from proceeding.
That would be my understanding. They may have put it right in the complaint right off the
Right.
bat. to
And
have
that's
injunctive.
permanent or only good for a certain amount of time?
Well, usually a stay is pending the litigation,
Okay.
so that
The
until
litigation
such
in
time
land
as it's
court.
completed or an
Okay.
agreement is reached, that
Yeah.
you would not be able to do it.
Okay.
That
Interesting.
is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, now,
Okay.
do you have a question?
I wanted to ask you about sanctuary cities, sanctuary
Okay.
state. Is Massachusetts a sanctuary
No.
state? We're not.
No, we are not.
Okay.
So this issue has come up. This is an area I can really talk
Good,
about
okay.
because
Good.
I am.
No, you talked well about
uh,
the soil
yeah, you're very
reclamation. No, it's great.
I've actually been on the Judiciary Committee
Mhm.
since I started, and I've been the ranking member for the last
Oh,
6
very
or
good.
7
Nice.
years. Thanks. But we actually first got something of that flavor, I want to say in like 2011 or 2012. At that time, it was called the Trust Act, and it was predicated on if, in fact, they complied with federal ICE regulations. People were afraid to call the police in certain areas because if they were ICE potentially, ICE was potentially looking for them. And they said it made people not be able to trust the police because the police would have to turn them in. But there is such a thing as the supremacy clause. So ICE immigration is the federal. It's under the jurisdiction of the feds, and that does supersede Massachusetts law on that issue. We are under the supremacy clause. We have to follow federal law. So my understanding is that, and I don't believe Governor Patrick would do it either, because I remember somebody at the hearing saying, why don't you go to the governor and ask him if he would do it as an executive order. My guess is he wouldn't, and that's why they were bringing it before the legislature. And from the legislature perspective, we would have to be creating a law that would say that you had to disobey a federal law.
Right.
And we can't
Creating
really,
a law to break a law.
we really couldn't do
No.
something like that.
Okay.
So I think there are some cities that have self-proclaimed themselves as
yeah.
sanctuary cities. The big issue,
Within the state.
and again,
Yeah.
for the state perspective, that I can't see the state doing it at any point. What would partly be a problem is we would lose federal funding, potentially, if we basically are saying we're not going to follow federal laws. So that's always the risk if you kind of put yourself out there.
So it would have to be a law, not a judicial decision. It would be a law if it became a sanctuary state.
It would have to have been passed in the legislature for the
Okay.
whole state to become.
a
It would
law.
have to be passed in
Not
the
just a
legislature.
judge deciding.
Yeah, no.
All
So
right.
the judge deciding, it actually really isn't even, it almost shouldn't even make it to the judge, because as far as the law actually goes, it's if someone has committed or is suspected of committing a crime, their information goes into a database, a federal database, okay? And it doesn't matter who you are. It's not immigrant related. Everybody is supposed to go in this database once they're fingerprinted. And the local police, if there is a hit from ICE, the local police are supposed to detain you, I want to say up to 72 hours until ICE gives further instructions as to what they want to do. So normally it's more at the arrest is where the issues have arisen. At the arrest, if somebody goes in with fingerprints and is a hit, they're not, the feds will let them know, actually. That's where the connection will be made. And then there's 72 hours to hold. I think some cities in Massachusetts are taking the position that they're not going to do that. And some people are saying that they think that's an overstepping of the federal.
Well, that judge that just let someone out the back door.
But that wasn't really a sanctuary city
no,
issue.
it was just, but it was an ICE related.
It was an
and
ICE
she's being
related
held
thing,
for
and
obstruction of
I
justice.
can understand why that she got in some trouble because of the fact that even though we're in a state and we have to obey state laws, we have to obey federal laws too.
Right.
So if you have someone in the position of the judiciary and they blatantly said, I'm going to disobey federal law, not disobey it, I'm going to try to thwart it, so to speak. Obstruction of justice. Prosecution of justice on a federal case. Yeah.
Charging her with. Yeah.
So I can perfectly understand why there was some trouble after the fact, because you purposefully said, I'm going to thwart or obstruct a federal law, federal justice system.
So you got a question?
The Promise Act. That seems to be a hot topic too.
Yeah.
That really does.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think the topic is, would Pepperell and the surrounding towns
get a revision of
any,
it, right?
Right.
Revision
Well, so this is the thing. The Promise Act is really one of the proposals on the table, okay? There are several other proposals on the table, and whatever is going to happen in the end, based upon my experience, is going to be a hybrid. It's going to be, it's sort of like, last year was on the criminal justice reform. Well, it took in bills from so many different people, became part of the criminal justice reform, like omnibus bill. I think you're going to see an education omnibus bill. You almost did last year with the Education Foundation budget review team and everybody.
That said they were lacking $2 billion or something in education shortfall.
In addition, so what happens is if a bill passes in the House, and it did last year, and a different bill passes in the Senate, and it did last year, then the two sides, there are 3 House members and 3 Senate members that have to meet and reconcile it and come up with a final resolution. You can't do it if you don't have 2 out of the 3 on each side. Okay?
4.
Yeah, but you can't just have 4. You have to have 2 on one side and 2 on the other, and they're all in agreement.
Yeah.
They were not able to do that. And so at the end of session, it died because it wasn't, they weren't able to come up with a hybrid. They're working really hard on coming up with a hybrid, but unfortunately, I know the Promise Act offers so much, and it would be wonderful, but I just cannot see it being funded.
Yeah, there's no new revenue stream to fund it.
Well, there are some revenue streams through the marijuana sales tax. Marijuana sales tax, and
that would go into it.
So there will be some, there will be some new income. I don't know what they're proposing mobile online betting that could bring in some new income. I know that I heard there's a proposal to put a rather exorbitant tax on vaping, which, so there are potential sources of new revenue, and the economy is doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But one of the things Massachusetts was saved by, and I saw this in the first few years that I was there, we fortunately had fared the recession better than any other state. And the reason for that is we had a very healthy rainy day fund or general
yeah.
fund. So we do have parameters, like a certain amount does need to always get put into that, a certain percentage of revenue, so that we stay secure.
I read somewhere that the teachers union wanted to use some of that for
Yes.
funding.
Yes.
You wouldn't let that happen, or you would?
I don't know that would have to be voted on by the whole
Yeah.
legislature. But I think what the issue is, and I've gone to a meeting with a group with actually the administrator of, Secretary of Administration and Finance, when Governor Baker's proposal initially came out. And part of the problem that everybody wants to sort of figure out is throwing money at certain schools doesn't change anything. It really doesn't.
No.
Yeah. And so we want to make sure that it's not just like you're going to bump them up because they're doing poorly, but what is going to happen to improve it. And I think that's really, one of the things I think has to happen, and it's partly because my daughter is a public school teacher in Boston, and she teaches in Roxbury. And, one of the things she said, if they really want to help these kids, they'd get mental health counselors in the schools, and the kids would have somebody that they could go to. Because right now, I think she said they may have like one social worker for 700 kids, and they have a nurse who's half with them and half with another school. I think the resources have to be applied in a way that we know they're going to make a difference. And that's what I don't know what the magic thing is, and I know they're working very hard at it. I've talked to the chair of the Education Committee. The chair that was on the Education Committee from the Senate has been replaced this year. So I think the hope is that it will bring about more of a reconciliation. And
what are they going to use to measure what they'll give each city or town? What are they going to use, like income?
Well, this is part of the problem. The way that the funding for education is structured, it's not based on income. It's based upon real estate values
of the homes in the
the median home values. Okay. So one of the problems, like I pointed out to the Secretary of Administration and Finance, is that isn't an accurate picture. It doesn't really reflect anything. And I used as an example Dunstable. I want to say somebody told me a piece of information, one of the selectmen a few years back, that I want to say it's like 8 families own 70% of the land in Dunstable, or 7 families own 80%. So how do you measure an entire town when you've got that kind of thing? So I don't think it's and you could have people that have low incomes but own homes. Particularly people who are elderly and whatnot. So. It's not a good measure. It's not a good measure. And what I had hoped is that they were going to completely revamp the cherry sheets, which is the formula sheets that they use. But the proposals I've seen thus far just take them and sort of commensurate percentage-wise bump them all up a little bit. But the difference when I looked at a few months ago to our towns wasn't hugely significant. Now, the other thing, and I brought this to the Secretary's attention too, when you do these formulas, you're not taking into consideration that urban schools like the Boston Public Schools, well, they have a huge amount of commercial tax coming into the city. And somebody told me, I think it was someone on the Education Committee, that I think they spend something like $22,000 per student in the city of Boston, and it doesn't. So there you have it.
What is it in our district? Like 15,000, 14,000, or something like that.
Yeah. So they're much higher, and it doesn't translate into a better educational system. One of the things that's interesting about the city of Boston that I found out from my daughter too is there is no busing at the high school level in Boston. And maybe not even at the middle school level. If you live more than a certain distance, you get a T-Pass. Because of that, the schools are within walking distance. So it's not like
everybody needs a T-Pass.
Well, it's not like every neighborhood in Boston is equally as advantaged.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see Beacon Hill doing pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe like where my daughter teaches in Roxbury,
Right.
and it's not just a financial, it's a whole slew of demographics, you
Right.
know, parental involvement, you know,
Yeah.
parental level of education potential. I mean, there's so many other things that can impact that.
It's
So
not just home values, yeah.
right, home value. Well, and the values in Boston are
Yeah.
pretty high. So
Yeah.
you know they should be getting top dollar. But with regard, I'm trying to remember the question you just asked me because it was something more pointed than that. Oh,
What
I
are
was
they-
saying
what else?
we don't all we